So Artemis Fowl has just dropped on Disney Plus, and it sure was foul! Look, this movie's bad, and I had a pretty strong compulsion to talk about it, but it doesn't exactly fill me with rage and depression like some other things I could be talking about this week, so thank goodness for small blessings, I guess. The Artemis Fowl books were never really my thing, so I'm approaching this from an almost entirely outsider perspective. What little I do remember about the book is enough to know that as an adaptation, this is pretty freaking lame, as if being a really boring movie wasn't enough. Going strictly off memory, most of the first book involves Artemis himself being kind of a selfish, evil prick and proud criminal mastermind, like a miniature Lex Luthor. That story was like a tense hostage situation where Artemis kidnapped a woman to ransom gold because he comes from a family of criminals and just wanted the profit, and here he's just doing it to get his dad back. Given that this movie wasn't released or worked on by one of their subsidiary offshoots, it should have been a no-brainer that Disney would have softened the edges on such an outright villainous protagonist as much as possible, but it certainly doesn't help that what's left is basically a plank of wood. Everything about Artemis in this movie is pretty much an informed trait. We're told that he's kinda antisocial and a super mega genius, but he never really does or says anything all that smart throughout the movie. Characters including Artemis himself will talk on and on about how clever and manipulative he is and how he's the best, when really it seems like if anything he's just really lucky. Sometimes it almost seems like he just read the script. Hey, what's that in the grass? Artemis isn't even a criminal, really. He commits like one crime over the course of this movie, which makes the coda of "I'm Artemis Fowl and I'm a criminal mastermind" at the end of the film pretty laughable. None of the other characters are likable or interesting enough to lighten the load of such a boring protagonist, unfortunately. Holly Short, the ostensible deuteragonist, is a fairy cop, which on its own makes her a bastard, and she's got the standard trite rookie cop arc that you can call almost all the beats of the moment that she's introduced. There's also Artemis's bodyguard Domovoy and his niece Juliet, both of whom you could really cut out of this movie without losing much. Especially Juliet. Why is she here at all? She adds less than nothing to the events of the film, and oftentimes I feel like the movie straight up forgets that she's there. By the time of the climax, we're meant to feel this sense of connection between Domovoy and Artemis especially, and it just never really materializes. Josh Gad as Mulch Diggums is probably the only sorta memorable character here, but even then that's only cause it's Josh Gad ad-libbing it up and doing his obnoxious shtick. He's also the main character of the movie's framing device, which involves him being interrogated by this organization which, I don't know, is it the CIA? Is it the FBI? Is it ACAB? We never find out, and I'm really not sure why this movie had to bother with the framing device at all. I feel like the dynamics between all these characters were way more nuanced and layered in the books, but here there's no real relationship building done at all. Part of this feels like it's on the editing. This film has allegedly been reshot to the point where it was basically filmed twice, and it certainly feels like it's been chopped to shreds. With lots of bizarre and sudden transitions between scenes or emotional beats and conversations, scenes straight up missing from the trailer, character relationships and motivations having seemingly changed completely off screen in a matter of seconds, scenes that play out like they're establishing meaningful character traits or arc setups but really just go nowhere, and lots of ADR dialogue that just screams late additions made to change the context of certain things. Honestly, you could make a whole drinking game out of lines spoken by characters whose bodies, or conveniently just their mouths, aren't in frame. Heck, I wouldn't be remotely shocked if that framing device I mentioned was entirely additional photography because someone was worried the kids wouldn't be able to keep up with the plot. There's no way the movie we have here is anything close to the shooting script, is all I'm saying. The editing is also especially bad during the action scenes. The big fight during the climax might be some of the most disorienting fight scene editing I've seen in a while. Beyond that, this movie suffers from the problem that a lot of these things have when they're clearly trying to beg for a sequel. Namely that the entire film feels like an extended first act, until characters start randomly talking over each other at 1,000 miles a minute in a rush to get to the end. Maybe the whole largely being set in this kid's house thing is another reason I was never able to fully engage with the book, but it's impossible for it to have been as boring as it is here. Really, it just makes me sad. A fantasy movie ostensibly for kids about someone their own age orchestrating a hostage situation is a real neat concept, but the movie hardly lets itself have any fun with that setup, probably because it was scared to let Artemis be too antagonistic. Every story choice made here seems like a shining example of why Disney was the worst studio to try and adapt this property. Something that could have been really cool and unique is instead watered down to the point where I'm not even sure I should be calling this a movie. Maybe a really boring extended pilot for G-rated Hellboy. A multi-million-dollar adaptation of this material directed by Kenneth Branagh of all people should have given us something really great. But instead we've got something the net benefit of which is that Disney Plus gets a little bit more traffic from saps like me, who are just too curious about all the bad buzz. Also, why is this what the criminal goblins look like? What the fuck? So that was a relatively short one. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and if you've got any thoughts on either the video or the movie, please voice them in the comments. And if you're a cop, either fairy or human, try to curb your impulses and avoid shooting me in the street. Thanks. Like and subscribe.